So there's no denying that recently all of the new Nintendo Switch game releases have been primarily ports and remasters outside of Princess Peach Showtime, which will indeed be dropping pretty soon here on March 22nd. But every other game that we know to expect in the calendar year of 2024 so far that is a Nintendo published game is indeed a port or remaster. And with that in mind, there's actually a recent article that popped up on VGC that caught my attention because it has a discussion around the idea of what if Nintendo just leans into this strategy for the rest of 2024 and until we ultimately see the reveal of the successor to the Nintendo Switch. And how would you guys feel if Nintendo just digs that much deeper into their backlog of games and gives us more ports and remasters throughout the rest of the year? And while some of these games I very much want to see playable on the Switch by the end of the generation, there are others on the list that are definitely some of the less interesting picks for me personally, but I figured it would be fun to have a back and forth conversation with you guys around what if we're in the port and remaster treatment phase for Nintendo Switch games until Nintendo Switch 2, outside of maybe one or two new original games, and how would you feel if some of the games on this list is indeed the rest of what finishes out the Nintendo Switch lifecycle? And we're going to unpack all of that. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first hop over to VGC where you can see some of the highlighted article in question, which reads, Nintendo needs to port these 12 games before Switch 2. There's still plenty of gold to be mined from Nintendo's back catalog. Nintendo has been extending the life of its console in recent years with a series of brilliant re-releases from its back catalogs. Sometimes these come in the form of straight ports or detailed remasters. Examples include Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, Miitopia, Skyward Sword HD, Metroid Prime Remastered, and Pikmin 1+2. Other times it goes a step further and gives us full remakes, as seen with the likes of Super Mario RPG, Another Code Recollection, Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, and Famicom Detective Club. As development focus shifts towards games for its next console, Nintendo may continue turning to its classics for inspiration to keep the Switch library topped up with new releases, a strategy that will be especially useful if we're all lucky and the Switch 2 is backwards compatible. Now, the first game's right at the top of their list. If you've been around on the channel for a while, you know that we are no stranger to this topic. Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD have been in the rumor mill speculation talk for far too long now at this point. We originally thought these were going to release as part of the Zelda's 35th anniversary celebration, and since then they've kind of just been in limbo. Fans questioning if the rumors about them were ever true, from the likes of VGC's own Andy Robinson and Jeff Grubb and many others in the know claiming that these games would indeed hit the Nintendo Switch, and then the claims became Nintendo might be saving them for a potential Tears of the Kingdom delay. Then that happened and we still didn't get them, and now we're like, is Nintendo saving these for the cross-generational phase to new hardware, or do they just not exist, period? Well, regardless of where you fall with your own personal beliefs around whether or not these games will come over, I do think that, as VGC points out, there are some of the only missing 3D Zelda games. In fact, the only mainline missing 3D Zelda games that are not playable on Nintendo Switch currently, outside of, if you want to count A Link Between Worlds as a 3D game, which it's kind of more isometric 2D, but it definitely has some good transitional phases when you're traveling on the wall with that unique mechanic they came up with in that game, and of course some of the cutscenes. But just in reference to the mainline 3D Zeldas and most of the entire Zelda franchise, it's playable on the Switch, but some of the biggest fan favorite classics are just straight up missing, and it's because they were released, of course, on the Wii U, which was just not as successful as the Switch. 13 million units, not many people got to play these games. Then we see Nintendo turn around and port almost all of the Wii U library to the Switch eventually throughout its life cycle, and these ones are just missing. So it's not to say that we have any more information that these games will come sooner or later, but you just think it makes logical sense that if Nintendo has a lighter software release schedule for 2024 and they need more time to get their first party games ready for 2025 and the ultimate launch of the Switch 2, hopefully in the beginning of the year, that these games would be somewhere in the holster to pad out their release schedule. But we'll have to wait and see for those, but we are going to continue on down the list because the next one on there is another game I would love to see make it over, and this isn't the fan classic from the Star Fox franchise, but just due to the lack of anything we've had for Star Fox at all, I wouldn't mind seeing this brought over to the Switch, and it would obviously have a much larger sample size of an audience to potentially sell to than it did on the Wii U. And the interesting thing about porting Star Fox Zero would be reworking the controls with how they worked, as far as the tablet controller really having a lot to do with the Wii U gameplay. I think that this game really isn't half bad, but just due to how poorly it sold even on the Wii U, I don't know that Nintendo will ever touch it or go back to it. But visually it holds up. They wouldn't have to do a whole lot there in the graphical department, but what would have to take some reworking is the control scheme, and we may only see Nintendo tackle projects like that for bigger franchises, like Zelda Skyward Sword being a perfect example. That one had a lot of controller rework in there to re-release on Switch, and we saw it for a franchise like Zelda. I don't know that we'll see that for Star Fox Zero, but I do hope we see something Star Fox. It doesn't have to be a Wii U port. They could pick something like Star Fox Adventures or Assault, or better yet, give us Adventures and Assault in a combo pack, because they kind of have different gameplay styles that I really enjoy thoroughly on each of them. But we'll have to wait and see if Nintendo has anything Star Fox, but we are going to continue down the list. And this one is one that I actually am not familiar with. So Pool Blocks Pushmo series, haven't checked this game out at all. It might be a hidden gem. Maybe it's more popular than I'm aware of, and I'm just not sure of it. You let me know in the comments down below if you guys are familiar with this series and whether or not you would want to see it brought over to Switch. And then we have another one that we have to spend some time on, and this is one out of the list that if I had to say out of any of the games that I'm semi-confident in that we will see release in 2024, it's Metroid Prime 2 and 3. Now, whether or not they drop at the same time or if they're trickled out separately like we saw with Metroid Prime 1's release, that remains to be seen. But the outstanding rumor is that Metroid Prime 1 was getting the big boy remaster, the more in-depth treatment, and of course we did see them rework the textures and the lighting, and Nintendo really did go in depth with that remaster. However, the outstanding rumor for 2 and 3 is that they would get a more simple HD upres, and I am picturing something more akin to Pikmin 1 and 2, where they're still clearly visually very much a GameCube game, but upres to HD, and given that native widescreen resolution and some likely quality of life enhancements with modernized controls, especially considering that I do believe for Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, they would give us the option to play with traditional analog controls and not do the forced motion with Joy-Cons. I actually think that whatever that control system is that they developed for Prime 1 Remastered will just be simply implemented in Prime 2 and 3 Remastered, which is flawless because they literally gave you all of the ways to play. You want to play with the original GameCube style controller layout where you have to stop with the R button to aim around, you can do that. You want to play like a modern first-person shooter with dual analog support, you can do that. You want to play like you did on the Wii where you have aiming with motion controls, you can do that as well. So love to see all of that customization and support in Metroid Prime 1 Remastered, and I think that these could be some of the next games up for announcement at any given time. If the rumors for an April Nintendo Direct are true, these could either be shadow dropped there, or they could at the very least be acknowledged and looked at, and then we get a summertime or even early fall release date. And I'm still not entirely opposed to the idea that Nintendo could be saving Metroid Prime 4 for its big holiday 2024 release, especially considering that we now know that Pokemon doesn't even have anything for holiday 2024. At least that's announced right now. They could pull out Black and White remakes last minute, but we already know about Legend ZA being a 2025 game, and we have no indication that they're releasing anything else this calendar year. So will Nintendo turn to Metroid to get that one final push of holiday sales, and maybe they stack it with the Legend of Zelda games, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess coming over, and then they still really have a decent new games lineup for the holiday season? We'll have to wait and see with all of that, but I did like to see that game or both of those games rather, on this list. Metroid Samus Returns is another great example. If you don't know or can't tell already, huge Metroid fan, and I wish the entire series was playable on the Switch easily, and with each game having its best form available to us. And no doubt Metroid Samus Returns from the 3DS was indeed the best version of that game by far and away. The Game Boy game, while it's incredible that they pulled that off back in the day when they did, this is a true from the ground up remake that just added so much new functionality, did so many things right, and it's how anybody should experience the second installment of 2D Metroid games if possible. So this one is one that could take a little bit of extra work, kind of that Luigi's Mansion 2 HD treatment, where it still visually might look like a 3DS game, but if they slow down and redo some of the textures and up-res everything, you really have the core function gameplay all already intact, and a great story and great boss battles throughout. You just have to touch up some of that stuff, and it could be easily ready to go at a $40 price point, and I think sell decently well on the current Switch today. Now from there, we really do fall off a cliff in terms of games that I am very familiar with, other than Kid Icarus Uprising, which we will get to in a minute. Rhythm Heaven, I have not played this game myself, but it does look like, you know, Game Boy Advance, DS, Wii, 3DS era, something that I missed out on as far as first-party Nintendo releases. Now, Kid Icarus Uprising, on the other hand, this is one that's another game on this list that at least is somewhere in the rumor mill conversation, because we did have that very interesting hint from Mr. Sakurai where he kind of looked directly at the camera and said, I wish somebody would port Kid Icarus Uprising to the Nintendo Switch so you could play it on a TV. You know, he made that direct reference. We don't know if that was him just poking fun at Nintendo and hoping that they do it, or if it was him kind of insinuating that, yeah, he's working on this right now. And we do know that Bandai Namco is working on some kind of 3D action adventure remaster for the Nintendo Switch, or I guess it could be Switch 2 to be fair, but we do know that at some point in time, Nintendo may likely return to Kid Icarus to see if the series will continue to sell on the Switch, and I would love to see this one given a second shot, just because, you know, some of the 3DS games that came out were absolutely incredible, and I really think if they were given the opportunity with modern controls and a console that's a hybrid console that you can play on a TV, it may appeal to that much broader of an audience. These won't be massive hit success Mario or Zeldas of the world, but they will at least perform solid, I think, from a sales perspective, and it'll give fans new and old more visibility around Kid Icarus and some of the more niche franchises. Pilot Wings, another 3DS game that they're recommending to come over. I would highly agree with that as well and would love to see it ported to the Switch. Jam with the Band, another rhythm game is what I'm trying to say, from the DS it looks like. And then we have Elite Beat Agent, so big fan of rhythm games here, it sounds like, from VGC. Hotel Dusk in the Last Window, I did not actually play that game. Excite Truck and Excite Bots, and I think that these are from the Wii era. Yes, they are. And so, you know, they do have plenty of ports and remasters that they can pull from. Really at the top of the list, Zelda, Metroid, obviously Kid Icarus, those are the big ones for me, but I want to hear from you guys, Star Fox as well. I want to hear from you guys if there's any games on this list that you really hope we see make it to the Nintendo Switch before we close out this generation, and which out of the games that we did talk about on this list do you think are likely to make it over, and which ones that are missing from the list do you certainly hope we will see make it over at some point in time, now or in the future. So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before we leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch the video on screen next if you haven't already. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.